all for coming. We are thrilled, as we are each time we have these sessions, to have an amazing guest from our area. And we're lucky today to have Brendan Gill. Brendan has had just an amazing career, which is a big focus point of these sessions. And we'll dive right into it in terms of talking about his experience both as an elected official within this area, but also as a strategist for a variety of elected officials through the course of the last 20 or so years. As a reminder, I just want to talk a little bit about the seminar and why we do this. The real key and the hope is to provide perspective, both in terms of how to discover a professional passion, but also to get a clear understanding of the kind of work that's available, that's out there for everyone. And sometimes finding a pathway to that work requires obviously mentorship and thought partnership. And today we're lucky to have Brendan here, who is without a doubt one of the most important political strategists in the state. He is routinely in the top 10 or even in the top 5 of the most valuable strategists that we have in the state. We're very lucky to have him today. And we're also thankful for the service and commitment that he's provided Northern Jersey. I'm going to start off with just a few questions just to get the ball rolling, and then hopefully we can open it up and get some input from everybody else. But I guess, the first question I would have for Brendan is to talk a little bit about what you do both as a strategist and also as an elected official. And then after we talk a little bit about that, you give everybody an understanding of the kind of professional pathway you built for yourself. I want to talk a little bit about how you got there. So if you could maybe start off, just talk to us a little bit about what your day is like and the kind of work you do both in service of the state and in service of some of our top elected officials.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. For everyone who came out today, thank you for being here. It's very honored to see all the students who came out today, and I appreciate that introduction. I wish my mom was here to hear all that stuff about being the top this and top that. But why I really came today primarily was because I think you just hit on the word service and public service. And I sat where many of you were sitting today when I was in school, not really sure about what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go or how I wanted to do it, but had opportunities to hear from people who had experiences and helped shape the opportunities that I then received and was able to capitalize on. So first and foremost, just I guess a little bit about myself. I'm born and raised. I know we're in Bloomfield, but I'm born and raised in Montclair. I'm a Montclair Mountie, graduate of Montclair High School, graduate of Seton Hall University, and then went on to spend some time in public service. When I was in college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew that I had a passion for government, for politics. I had an interest in politics, but I really didn't know what that meant from the perspective of how to build a career. So what I did was I started to volunteer, started to do some internships towards my junior and senior year in school. And when I graduated, I was trying to get a job working on Capitol Hill. So I was a political science major, come out with this degree. It's like, okay, now I need to get a job. What am I going to really do with this degree? And no one in my family was involved in politics. No one, my dad is a public school teacher, still teaching in the Montclair district. But I didn't really have those types of contacts or connections, didn't have anybody really to call. So I go to Washington, and I try to find an internship with a member of Congress or a senator. Essentially, no, a lot of doors slammed in my face, getting a little discouraged. Finally get a call from that outreach to somebody who says, listen, there's somebody who's running for office in your backyard. They're running for Congress. And they have a campaign going on right now, and you might want to reach out to them and see if you can get involved. So this person at the time was the mayor of Patterson. I cold called the office Just called them, said I'd like to make, I didn't know this wasn't the thing you weren't supposed to do. And I use this story to illustrate, always go with your gut, always follow up where you think you should follow up. So I called his office and I said, I'd like to make an appointment to see the mayor. And they said, who are you? I said, I'm Brendan Gill. I'm like, yeah, so like, who are you? I said, I'm somebody I'd like to get involved. So sure enough, the person who was handling it said, listen, I'm going to talk to the mayor, I'm going to get back to you. They called me back and they say, can you be here tomorrow at this time? So I go to the meeting, very excited, thinking that I'm going to finally get an opportunity or maybe a break, and I'm going to advise this person on all these serious issues. So I had got myself together, tons of research, show up, notebook under my hand. I was going to tell this person what they should do. I was going to give them advice on how things should go, and I had it all figured out, man. I knew what the problem with the campaign was, what the problem with the national economy was, you name it, I had an opinion on it. So I go to the meeting, the mayor takes the meeting, he's listening to me, and he says, listen, that's very good, but what I'd like you to do is, I'd like you to grab a clipboard, and I'd like you to go down to Pathmark on Union Avenue, and I'd like you to start registering voters. I'd like you to start registering voters. I said, okay. So I did that for a week, and I came back, and I said I registered 40 voters. I said, I'd like you to do it again. And I'd like you to talk to this person about doing it again. So I started doing that activity week after week, volunteering that time, at which point I realized this is how you get involved. This is how you start. Somebody wants to see, are you committed? Are you going to learn about the process? So I did. So finally, after months of doing that, and working other jobs while I was doing it, the campaign finally says, listen, we'd like to hire you. So I'm like, pumped. Oh wow, I'm going to get a job offer. And we'd like to hire you for $750 a month. As a college graduate, $750 a month. But I made the decision at that time, and I was able to work in a couple other jobs, that I was going to take that job. Like the immediate reaction was most of what I just told, $750 a month. Like I could work an hourly job, make 3-4 times that. But I took that opportunity to do that for $750 a month, work on that campaign, and the person who was running for Congress goes on to win. They win by a couple thousand votes. They have to hire staff. They hire me on their staff. Congressman Bill Pasquarello Jr., who was the mayor of Patterson at the time. That's how I got my start, locally, being actively involved, being engaged, and also deciding to spend some time doing something, that maybe I thought I was above doing or should be doing more, but learning about the process in that way.
So I want to kind of dive into that before we get into some of the other things that you're currently doing, because that is of huge import to this audience as well. But I also want to just take a step back and talk about two parts to the story that you just shared. One is how you discovered the passion as it relates to service and politics that you have. So not so much, what I want to try to do is get to the ground level. Stage one, you're at a certain age. How did you decide that you were going to be a political science major? How did you decide that you were going to want to intern in Washington or work for free for Bill Pasquarello? What were some of the influencers that got you to that spot? Because I think one of the things that we've been talking a lot about in the seminar is not just finding the pathway, but also discovering the passion. So I think if you could start with discovering a specific passion, no matter what industry it might be, that having that definition helps lead you as it's led you. So talk to us a little bit about discovering that passion.
I think two things for me that were a big influence on that were the community that I grew up in. It was a very active politically community, socially conscious community, and that had a very personal story that I was connected to. Montclair, which is now known as, very diverse community, one of the most integrated communities, was not like that many, many years ago. I mentioned my dad. He was a big influence on me in my in my life. When my dad first started teaching in the Montclair Public Schools, which was probably 1969, 1970, roughly, he would tell me and tell my family a story. He said, listen, I was a young teacher, young white teacher, and I showed up to work in the school district, and I was sent to Glenfield School, which is the school he still teaches at to this day. And he's there for the first day, and they get all the materials and they get all the books. And if you're familiar with Montclair, Glenfield School is in what's called the 4th Ward, traditionally African-American section of the community. He gets all the books, school's predominantly African-American, and all the books and the materials are the 10-year-old books from middle school that's in the north end of town. That's in the white neighborhood. And he and a couple other teachers raise their hand and they say, listen, why do we have the old materials? What's going on with this? This is not right. And they started at that time a movement, to both integrate and desegregate the Montclair Public Schools. And they were successful. They created the magnet school system that exists in Montclair to this day. We don't have neighborhood schools. We have magnet schools, which means you go to different schools in different places based on the theme of the school and based on making sure that the school reflects the racial composition of the community that you live in. So to me, that was a big early life lesson to say there was something that wasn't right, and some people acted locally to try to do something about it, and they had success. He was a social studies teacher, so there was a lot of conversations about, and this is not about him, he will tell you it's never about him, but there was a lot of conversations about just politics and government, just around the table, and who was doing what. And that sparked me to do some things that were probably unusual, like in the 5th and 6th grade, we would go to town council meetings back then just to see what was going on. I think we were in a group we were in like maybe it was a Cub Scouts or something like that. It wasn't a Cub Scouts, but something like that. And we went to probably in the 7th grade, which by the way was a real popular thing to do in the 7th grade. We went to a town council meeting to maybe earn some credit for class or something. And there were a bunch of things on the agenda. And one of them, and I remember this very vividly, was about whether or not a school that was slated to be sold should be repaired or not. And a few of us got up and said at the meeting, well, the school that we're in has this problem, and this problem. Well, later on during the course of the council meeting, some of the folks picked up on that and they said, listen, I don't think we should do this because these young people that we just heard from just now said the problem is over here. It's over here and over here. So the mayor at the time wrote each of the students who were there, he wrote each of us a letter that I have to this day, which said, he wrote it to our parents or our caregiver or whatever, and they basically said, listen, if these young people had not shown up, I can tell you right now that we might have made the wrong decision about what we needed to do going forward. So that kind of stuck with me to kind of see, you know what, there's a lot of things that happen in local government, because everyone worries about who the president is and who a member of Congress is and who a senator is. But what I kind of learned kind of early was that who your mayor, councilman, and freeholder actually really impacts your quality of life in a real way. In a way that a president, a senator, and a congressman, and I say that respectfully, not because those jobs aren't important, they're very important, but in a way that maybe they will not. So those two things are really what led me to think that I wanted to be involved in government. I wanted to be involved somehow in public service. I wanted to find a way to serve my community, to make some positive change, and to seek avenues to do that.
So I just want to unpack that a little bit and try to get some sort of connection in relation to maybe perhaps some of the students out there. What kind of advice would you have if you were a student or if you were Brendan Gill 20 years ago? What kind of advice would you have in terms of helping people find their passion? You talked a little bit earlier about jumping in and being proactive and not letting doors slam in your face. I think that's relatable to just about any industry, whether it's politics, government service politics, or perhaps working in the fashion industry or working as a television director. Talk to us a little bit about how to be proactive. Talk to us a little bit about how to discover that passion that might go through lessons learned that you had growing up.
Yeah, and I think what you just hit on when I said the first key, I really believe, is you have to understand that you're going to have some doors shut and that you're going to have obstacles. And the key is how you respond to those obstacles. That's the key. It's how you get up when someone tells you no, when you're trying to do something that you believe you can do. So that's number one. The second, most general thing that I can say is take time to learn about what you want to do outside of the classroom and anything that you want to do. Classroom learning is important, but if you have a passion, whether it's for sports or for politics or for business or for law, you need to think about what am I doing, my advice, what am I doing to really learn about those things in a real way? You know, I mean, internships are important. I don't want to just say it's just internships, but am I serving internships? Have I sought out mentors in those industries? Do I have a mentor? That's something I wish 20 years ago somebody would have said to me, which was, hey, I developed some, but I didn't really know at the time what a mentor was, you know, or what a mentor was supposed to be. Having a mentor in what you are passionate about or what you're doing is very important because you get that level of experience. Like, have you tried this? Have you done that? Where do you want to go? So those two things in terms of mentorship and finding what I call real world, that's been my experiences, real world experiences are very important because something like politics and government, there's only so much you can learn in a political science class, right? Because the nature of government and business and politics involves people. It involves people, and you have to learn how to deal with lots of different people. And there's only so much that you can do in the classroom doing that. So, and I don't say that to mean don't try to do well in class. I want that the message. I want the message to be make sure you're getting that right balance. I was a terrible student. Terrible student in high school. I got it together in college because I started to focus a little bit more. I started to understand and learn how to study. So I always said I was a late bloomer in some of the things that I've done. And my other message would be it's never too late. You don't have to have it all figured out today. You don't have to have it all figured out when you walk out of here of what you want to do. What you generally need is an idea of what am I passionate about, what do I care about, and you kind of want to build out that way. And I think that you will, if you do that and stay true to that, you will have success.
That's a great segue to, I think, where I'd like to go and then open it up for questions. So we've talked a little bit about Brendan's passion. We've talked a little bit about some of the factors that helped not just instill that passion, but also develop it. And we've also talked about the pathway that kind of got you from passion to actual job. Over the course of the years, obviously, your career has extended quite a bit. But at least for the purposes, or a big purpose, in addition to the seminar, is not just to kind of understand the challenges that we face in finding a career, but also having a sense of what's out there. What kind of jobs can some of these folks jump into? And luckily, we've had some great speakers who've come in, kind of define what they do, and hopefully educate all of us on those opportunities. So for the purposes of the audience, talk a little bit about what you're currently doing now, and not just for a bio sense, but also for a sense of just understanding that, hey, that might be a job I might want to do, or something like it.
It's a great question, and I get asked that question all the time about how did you get where you are, and in the field of politics and government, there is no set blueprint like there is potentially in other professions. You know, You want to be a lawyer, you want to be a doctor, there are certain things you got to do. You want to be an accountant, you got to go do these things, and then I will do that job. Politics and government is a much broader area. You can do things like I did, which was work on campaigns. That was my pathway. I went to work for a member of Congress on his campaign. Then these elected officials have staffs. They get to hire staff, full-time staff. So members of Congress, senators, governors, state senators, assembly folks, freeholders. And for those of you who don't know what a freeholder is, and I wouldn't blame you, your county legislator. They get to hire full-time people who get to work on developing policy, working on legislation, working on communication, working on potentially raising money. All of those things are part of politics and government. The campaign door, I always thought, is a good one to potentially come through because you get to see each of those things. The campaign has, as you know, has each of those things. It has a finance department, it has a communications department, it has what they call a field department, which is your direct voter contact. That's your canvassing, your phone banking, that type of activity. It has policy, I think, which we hit at developing what you're actually running on. And then it also exposed to me personally paid communication. So all those television ads that you see and the radio ads, and I'm dating myself a little bit, but the digital content, not just the radio and the TV, which are geared toward people my age, our age, but all that sponsored content that you're looking at, whether it's on Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, whatever that platform is, there are people that are designing that content, and they spend a lot of time trying to figure out what young people are paying attention to, with the idea of trying to motivate young people to come out and vote, to get engaged, to be engaged. So, so more, I guess more broadly, what I would say is that my experience, again, I ran campaign for Senator Booker, I ran the campaign for Governor Murphy, I ran the campaign for Senator Lautberg. As I mentioned, I ran Congressman Pasquarello's campaign. The campaigns allowed me then to also have exposure to what each of these individuals did in their official capacities. So I did it like on each side. I was on the campaign side and I was on the official side. You don't necessarily have to do it that way. That's just one way to do it, if that's where your passion is and what you want to, and a way to get involved.
And I also think too, in terms of what you're defining, the blueprint that you're defining is certainly relatable to most any other industry, both in terms of getting hands-on experience as a volunteer, but also as a professional as well. Before we go to questions though, you kind of just defined a little bit of what you do as a strategist, and you touched on it early on, but I do think it's important for all of us to have a good sense of all these roles that our guests are a part of. Do talk to us a little bit about what it's like to be a freeholder, an elected official, and to answer your ultimate question, which is, what does a freeholder do?
So kind of working for all these elected officials, when I got involved in politics, I didn't have the desire to run for office. That's not where I started. I didn't think I wanted to run for anything. I thought I wanted to do it behind the scenes. Over the course of time, what led me to actually run for office was that I had worked on a lot of these campaigns, and a local elected position became available. And the leadership who was selecting candidates for those positions was contacting me as a community leader to say, what do you think about this person for this office? What do you think about that person for this office? And quite frankly, I didn't think that those folks necessarily had the passion or the direction that I wanted to see in this particular position. So I kind of kept saying, this is another example, kind of saying, no, I'm not sure. And then they finally said, well, why don't you do it? Which wasn't something that I had really given a lot of thought to. So I started to ask some folks and say, well, what do you think about what do you think about if I run for local office? And one of the folks that I went to and asked, they said to me, well, listen, your whole life has been in government and the public sector. So they said, what could you possibly know about anything? And that's what motivated me, quite frankly, to run, because at that point in time, I thought, if our message is to young people and the next generation that government, politics, and running for office, and this is not a partisan matter. I'm not saying whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you're a Trump supporter, you're not a Trump supporter. I'm talking about the idea that if we don't engage, if you don't engage, and I chose to engage, there's a lot of things I could have done with my time and my career. I chose to do that. I was proud of that. And I said, we got to tell our young people that this is something that you should aspire to be a part of too. We can't say that politics and government is not something to be a part of, or it's dirty, or I don't know what those politicians do. Like, politics is us. Public service is us. It's not a bunch of people over here that you don't know. We are that process. We are the we. That's what motivated me to run, when that person said, because you have spent a lot of time and built your professional career in it, you actually don't have any valuable experience. And I just thought, that's dead wrong, and I'm going to try to do something about it.
Share with us as freeholder.
Sure. So a freeholder is a legislator in county government. Here in Essex, we have a county executive, Joe D., and a county legislative body. There's 9 freeholders. And we have oversight over the entire county budget. So the county of Essex has a $750 million budget, 700, so $750 million, that the 9-member freeholder board makes decisions on how that money is spent. So your vocational schools are under county control. The sheriff's office are under county control. Bloomfield Avenue is under county control. Your roads, your park system, Branchbrook Park here, Weekley, Glenfield Park, I could name the whole list. The county, if you're from Essex County, our zoo complex in West Orange. These are all things that the county has oversight over. So we, the freeholder board, functions almost like Congress or an assembly. So you have an executive who runs the day-to-day operation of county government, and we make all the decisions over every one of those areas. So public works, parks, education, sheriffs, the county courthouse, downtown, the prosecutor's office, every single one of those decisions, which again, I use this as an example, these are decisions that affect you. Quality of your road is a big deal. Your access to this campus is a big deal. How that money is spent is a big deal, and that's what the freeholder board is charged with doing.
Great, and we may go back to some additional questions on my end for Brendan while we have him, but for now I'd love to open it up, maybe get some reaction, maybe get some specific questions for our guest. And those questions can be related, obviously, to his experience, but also we hope that we can utilize Brendan's insights and experience as well, just in terms of all our personal and professional development. So if you have an interest or an idea, or just an industry that you're interested in being a part of, and just want to have a thought partner, this would be a great time to share any of that. So. 1 second.
But one other thing too that I wanted to highlight, and I forgot, thank you, is you have to be careful giving a politician the microphone, is that you get this kind of question from students all the time too about what was your path, how did you get there? There are, you asked about what I could tell the 20-year ago, myself 20 years ago. Here are the things that you need to be able to do well to compete in any market or any type of industry, in my opinion, one person's opinion. You should be spending your time here learning how to make sure you can do these things. Read, write, think, and think critically. 4. It sounds basic, but those skills are so important. Sounds like basic things. I mean, to be so thinking critically, to be able to be given an assignment where somebody asks you to go from A to B, more broadly, to do something from A to B, but not might give you all the instructions on how you get to B. To be able to assess information that you're given, and to be able to find solutions to get done the assignment that you've been given. Not only that, but also if you have the capability to know that there's another step, like, hey, I've only been asked to do this project and I've only been asked to get to this point, but I think we could also get to a point past that. And I know it's more broadly, but to think that way and to bring those things to people that you work with. Because when I interview a lot of people and I hire a lot of young people, I look to see what kind of service they have. I look to see if they were involved in their communities. I look to see if they did internships and all those things we also hit on. But if someone shows me that they have the ability to write well, read, synthesize information, you're ahead of a lot of other people potentially who are looking for these opportunities.
That's fantastic advice for all of us. I'll open it up to the floor. Are there any specific questions? Anyone have any thoughts or ideas that they'd like to share? Don't be afraid. Come on. Sure, come on.
I'm Destiny, I'm a freshman. You kind of emphasized on passion, like you gotta have a passion, like a drive. However, what I'm going in for international business and then grad school for hospitality, which is hotels and stuff. But my passion is critical thinking. Like I love philosophy, I love debate. Like I could argue all day, even if I'm wrong. But a lot of people second guess that. Like I should have a passion. I should go into being a lawyer or a philosopher, but that's not me. Like I don't want to do that. I want to do something bigger. Like I dream of owning Hilton's or Courtyard or Marriott, but I feel as though critical thinking can help me push that. Like that's my passion, but it's not my drive. It's not something I'm driven forward. Like I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to do desk work at all. So like my question to you is like, do you think I'm wrong for not going in the path and not taking it?
No, I don't think you're wrong at all. I mean, a lot of people told me that I needed to go to law school in order to be successful in politics. So once I got this campaign job, then I get hired and I'm working for the United States Senator on his staff. So I was the chief of staff on the government, what they call the government side. And what I realized at that point in time was, many years later, was that if I had listened to everyone who told me that I needed to go to law school in order to get this job, I found my own way to get to the job that I wanted to get to. And in fact, I didn't necessarily need to do what everyone told me I needed to do in order to get there. I was actually competing with people who had law degrees. I didn't have one. They were graduating from law school and trying to apply for a job that I already had. So I answer that question and say, no, I don't. I think you're on the right track. And then my other theme today is, I have an expression: there's no such thing as a bad decision once you make it. So you make a decision, you move forward. If you have to adjust, and I see that sometimes in younger people, and I probably was the same way. There's a long road in front of you. You have a long road in front of you, and you can change your mind about what you want to do and how you want to spend your time at any time. At any time. You're not locked into anything forever. You can spend 10 years doing something and figure out that, you know what, I don't like what I'm doing. And it's not too late. So I'm very optimistic in that way. To know that there's always a pathway, there's always an ability to change. And I think the short answer to your question is, no, I don't think you should do anything that you don't think you want to do or you shouldn't feel that you should do. And it sounds to me you're on the track to merge your skills to do something that you're also passionate about.
A lot of finding a job is about creating luck for yourself. And I think the ability to create luck for yourself gets a lot easier if you know what you want to do. And I think it's great that you develop the passion, that you're determined to move forward with that passion. And as Brendan said, you got to listen to your gut. Anyone else? Questions? That was a really good question.
I'm not a student, I'm an alumni, and I'm an employee of the college, but I was wondering if you could share perhaps your top 3 or 4 sound bites, bits of advice in terms terms of what our students need in terms of what it is to be a leader. Like for leadership, what would be the top 3 to 4 things you would say great leaders need?
That's a great question. In my opinion, I think the first thing that any great leader needs to be able to do is to listen. To listen. All great leaders have the ability to talk to people. You have a set of ideas. You know, leaders usually start with a set of ideas of where they want to go and how they want to get there. But then you have to actually talk to the people that you are seeking out to lead. So I would say number 1 is to listen. 2, don't ask people to do things that you're not willing to do yourself. You know, I made that a rule as I held management positions. So I most recently managed Governor Murphy's campaign. I oversaw I managed a staff probably of about 150 people. So I was involved in the campaign at the highest levels. I'm giving advice on how to prepare for a debate, what the television ad should look like, how much money are we gonna raise, what are we gonna say about this, what are we gonna say about that. But I also was still willing to go knock on doors, you know, with the field team. I was willing to throw up signs. You know, these are entry points, entry jobs. But to me, that was important to show to the people that I was asked to lead that there was nothing on this campaign that I wouldn't do, and therefore I'm asking you to do it. You know, so those 2 things I think are very important in leaders. And you know, third is, you know, you can be the leader, but you have to understand that it's not necessarily about you. You know, what I have found is, and I'm not saying I'm a perfect leader. I'm sure a lot of people have. You know, I've learned this over the course of time because I've had these management positions. When I was younger, I had to manage a lot of people who were older than me, and I was given the responsibility. Somebody saw something in me to say, this person has the capability to lead, but I had to manage people who were 15, 20 years older than me, and I had to figure out, how do I build trust when they've had potentially much more life experience than I had. And one of the ways that I did that was to make sure that they understand that it wasn't about me as an individual. You know, it was about what we were collectively trying to do. And some people bought into it, others didn't. You know, and the folks who didn't probably were never going to buy into it anyway. So those are 3 things I would say that come to mind, that I think both people that I've worked for, elected officials who I determined to be great leaders have. You know, separating the person from the cause is something in politics that I think is very important. I happen to have worked for people that I thought advanced issues that I cared about. So it just wasn't the individual. I didn't work for Cory Booker because I think Cory Booker is, you know, a great guy because he's got 1 million Twitter followers. Like, I care about what Senator Booker, I say that, you know, respectfully, is that I care about what Senator Booker is advancing when he's in Washington. I didn't go to work for Governor Murphy just because of the individual Governor Murphy. It's what he's doing right now, and that's what I take great pride. So when I see something, one of the things that Governor Murphy got done in his first year in office was he signed a bill and pushed a bill for pay equity. You know, right? To make sure, this was 2018 we're talking about, to make sure that a woman is paid the same amount as a man, you know, for the work that they do. That's right? We can give that a round of applause, I hope. But, you know, that to me is what it's all about. Like, when something like that gets done, I'm very happy for Governor Murphy, but what I'm most happy about is what Governor Murphy just did. Because he just did something that I think is going to, you know, make the world a better place, you know, for not only for all of us, but, you know, for my 6-year-old daughter, right? So, you know, to me, that those kind of things, I think, also then factor into what kind of leader that you become and you are.
Any other questions from the audience? Sure.
So what do you believe is your next step? Or are you satisfied
sorry, what was your name? Tina, nice to meet you. That's a great question. I have probably a little bit of an unusual path in the sense that I have done this, as Matt said, as a strategist, and that's what I do full time now. I now have evolved all this experience over the last 20 years, and I run my own business now. So now I would say I'm also an entrepreneur, in that sense, and that's a new experience for me, and I'm enjoying that experience, and I'm growing my business around these things that I have done in government, over the last 20 years in terms of working on campaigns and such. In terms of running for office, I'm very happy with where I am, and if there's opportunities to serve in the future, we'll take a look at them. But I don't know where that necessarily where it goes, because I will say this is probably one thing that I should have hit on before. Running, being an elected official is not necessarily a full-time job. So the freeholder board is a part-time capacity. So I could not support my family on just being a freeholder. So certain elected positions are part-time where you have to have another, maybe, listen, if you're well enough that you don't have to worry about that, then you can be a part-time freeholder. But many of these positions, like your mayor and your council and people like that, they are part-time positions. You have to have some kind of full-time employment. A couple of the others are not, senator, Congress, something like that. That's a full-time position. So we'll see where it goes, and if there's something that comes up in the future, maybe we'll give it a shot. But it's something you wrestle with too. When you also run for office, and this is probably could be a whole other separate class, is you have to spend a lot of time raising a lot of money. You need money to run for office. Which I think there's an influence of too much money in our political process. We could spend a lot of time talking about that right now, but right now, currently, when you want to run for office, you have to figure out ways to raise money, unless you are, unless you're lucky enough maybe to be able to self-finance a campaign. Campaigns cost money, and it's not a particular. There's nothing wrong with asking people to give you money. I think it's a way to show that people support you at any level. One of the brilliant aspects to then Senator Obama's first campaign for president was that he caught kind of this energy among grassroots activists and showed that through very small amounts, broadly, people could raise large amounts of money in order for him to be able to compete to run for president. Many people told him when he wanted to run for president the first time that he was not going to be successful because he wouldn't be able to raise the money he needed to raise in order to wage the type of campaign that he wanted to run. So he didn't accept that answer, and he found another way to do it. It's important, like that individual support when somebody gives you $5 to say, hey, like, I believe in you and I'm going to give you $5 towards your campaign. But asking people for money all the time is a tough. I would say for me personally, it's not a particular part. It's not something that I enjoy, right? But you have to spend time doing it.
Let's talk a little bit about leadership a little bit more, because it's a great opportunity that we have you here today. Obviously being a senior strategist for two of the more highly successful and informative leaders in our state, both with Senator Booker and with Governor Murphy. Without sharing too much, give us a little bit of insight in terms of what makes them unique leaders. Obviously, beyond the politics, beyond the votes, or even their future ambitions, when you're watching them, when you're listening to them, when you're advising them, what kind of attributes are they uniquely providing the state and even yourself one-on-one?
The first thing I could say for both of them is they both have unbelievable energy levels, high energy. And in anything you want to do and be successful in, you're going to have to work hard. There's no substitute for that hard work. So they're both committed to 12, 13, 14-hour days, 15-hour days every day. And there are no weekends. There are no days off. when you're in those positions, and they accept that responsibility. You raise your hand for it, but you have to know that that's something, and they embrace it. So energy level. Two, I admire Senator Booker for his use of, we made reference to it earlier, but his use of social media to communicate and build relationships with his constituents is quite impressive. And he's very comfortable in that space. I mean, they use this word, they say authentic. And I think probably could say for both of them, which I think why they've had a lot of success, they're both very authentic individuals. You could disagree about what they've done or what they stand for, but they are who they appear to be. And I think therefore they build confidence with the people that they seek to represent as a result. They also, and I'm thinking of things, and I'll get to maybe one thing where they're separate, but another area where they're probably very much very similar is they also worked their way up. Senator Booker, became, Stanford, Yale, but again, no one in his immediate family had been involved in politics, had run for any type of office, was a community rights activist, a housing activist in the city of Newark, ran for local council. And it kind of goes to the question that I was asked before, well, do you think you would run for something else, or this is the last stop for you? There's an expression in politics that sometimes you have to run for what's in front of you versus what you think you might want to be. So even though maybe Senator Booker had the aspiration to run for Senate, maybe he will run for president someday, he started by running a ward council race that he was not supposed to win. Everybody told him, you're not going to win this race. He was running against an institutional individual in the city of New York who was a pretty well-known heavyweight at that time. He wins that race. He goes on to run for mayor. He loses, but he comes back to run again. Goes on to eventually win. Serves as the mayor. Decides to run for United States Senator. Governor Murphy. People might know Governor Murphy. Had a successful career in business. However, he was, basically had nothing, growing up. Like he says, I was middle class on a good day. Slept in his, the same bedroom with his, siblings till he was 11 years old. His father, did odd jobs. His mom, who was a college graduate, made sure that they cared about getting an education. He went on to get an education, chose to pursue a career in business, started at the lowest level in finance, worked his way up and became a CEO of a major financial institution. So I think each of those showed that maybe even at a point in time, maybe the 20, 30 year ago Phil Murphy did know that where he wanted to end up. Maybe the 20, 30-year-old Cory Booker did know where they wanted to end up, or maybe they didn't. But they sure were not afraid to start at the entry point and didn't shy away from starting the entry point to start that journey.
So I have one more question on my end, which is really about persistence. We've talked about it, we've touched on it throughout the session today. We've talked about the importance of creating our own luck, about having definition in what we want to do. But I also want to add and get your thoughts on this. I mean, work is tough, right? I mean, you were just talking about the 15-hour days that you sometimes and often have to wage. Talked a little bit about, two very important leaders that have very high standards. There are times in which we don't meet those standards. There's times in which we face challenges, whether it be finding a job or keeping a job. And that's something that hopefully everyone in the audience will, if they haven't discovered, will discover, whether it be en route to making money or just en route to fulfilling their own personal and professional passions. So as you're confronted with challenges, when you're confronted with a bad day, how do you maintain a level of normalcy? How do you maintain your thought process in terms of not being dissuaded by outside factors?
I usually don't. I do a terrible job with that. You know, it comes back to something I said before. One, it's about there's no such thing as a bad decision once you make it. You're never locked in. You have to deal with the ramifications of your decisions, of course. You know, you make a decision, there's going to be ramifications for the decision that you make. But what I try to do to stay grounded is to think about things as opportunities, not forever, right? And when I'm having a terrible day, or things are not going the way that I think they should be going, or I think I'm being mistreated, you know, I try to think about, okay, where's the long-term place I want to go? And you use this word strategist a lot, and it's one of the things that in finding your passion and finding a gift, one of the things that I was identified for and had some talent for was to think about strategically not only where I wanted to be, but where a campaign might want to be, right? So a campaign is a day-to-day process, but at the end of the day, there's an objective, right? You want to get more votes than the other person you're running against, right? Whatever that strategic objective is. And every day what you're trying to do is you're trying to measure, are we meeting that objective? How am I getting towards that objective? Did I raise money today? Did I knock on doors? Did I get committed voters, right? There's metrics and ways that you can figure that out. So when those things aren't going your way, what you want to think about is, well, where do I want to focus on the fact that this phone call didn't go the way it did, or this person slammed the door in my face when I asked them for support, or this person's now supporting the other candidate that they said they told me they weren't, or do you want to focus on the immediate or where I ultimately want to end up? You know, and I think that's an important lesson when you're in school. You know, something that I wish I would have thought about a little bit more when I was in school too, that you can have a bad day in the classroom, you can have a bad day with a teacher or a professor or with your friends, but you still have a long-term goal, and you got to make the decision. Am I going to let that part is on you. Am I going to let that hold me back, or am I going to, you know, think about ultimately what I'm here to do? I know this is a long-winded answer, and just maybe think of one other thing too, which is one of the other reasons that I think I've had some success, and this goes back to the question about leadership and what do good leaders do. They focus on ideas and not people. So when you interact with people who spend a lot of time just talking about other people, I can guarantee you that that's going to be a person who's not going to get you very far. Because that's a person who's going to suck your energy, and they're going to sit there and they're going to talk about individuals. I'm almost never interested in folks who want to talk to me about individuals. I'm more interested in people who want to talk to me about what those individuals are actually doing. You know, and I think that's important.
And I think relating that back to the job market, relating that back to discovering your passions, to succeeding within those passions, I think Brendan has provided a number of lessons for all of us, but I think the final two, obviously, as it relates to both substance and perseverance and persistence, is an important ingredient as it relates to finding a job and ultimately being successful in that job. Just a quick question for the group. Is there any other final questions from the team here, from anyone? Sure, I think we have a couple more.
My name is Mahiba Brown. I know you mentioned how Cory Booker uses social media to enhance what he's doing. What advice can you give to students here as it relates to social media? Because I believe the generation today at times use it for the wrong purpose, and later on they don't see the ramifications of using it inappropriately.
That's a great point. So two things. The internet's forever. So, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't express who you are, or present your social media platform in a way that's true to yourself, because you should. but understand that what you say on those platforms and what you do on those platforms will stay with you. And I have to be, I'm being as candid as I can be. I feel sometimes lucky that I didn't grow up in a time where everything that I did when I was 21 years old and 22 years old was recorded. So we had we didn't have, go back to my first campaign, when they would put us in the field to do work, like knock on doors and things like that, you were sent with 2 rolls of quarters. When we got a pager, we thought like, oh man, we got a pager. Skynet. But quarters were for payphones, sorry. There were these things called payphones. Sorry. Payphones. So we didn't have that, you didn't have that ability to, for everything to be recorded, and you have to be sensitive to it. You have to be sensitive to it. What you say on those platforms, what you're doing on those platforms, potential employers, they're going to look at it. Whether they tell you that they are or they're not, first thing they're going to do after an interview or a person who has their responsibility, they're going to check your social media platforms to see what kind of things you're looking at. They're going to see something as simple as what your interests are. They're going to look to see what you put down as your personal interests. What kind of television shows you say do you watch? Who are you, and these are mostly, to Facebook, but who are you friends with? What have you said on Twitter? What kind of stuff, stuff that's, your Instagram photos. All those kind of things are representatives of who you are. And I've seen also people, you do have to be careful, and I say be careful meaning that somebody puts something on social media that has nothing to do with you, but you're a part of it, you're now a part of it. You're now a part of it. And people are going to use those platforms to make decisions about who you are. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, I'm just saying that's what I believe the reality is. That being said, you should use them. They're great opportunities to express who you are, to show who you are as a person. They also have a huge upside as a result. And I think that's the way I would say to young people, that's how you should think about it. They're more than just kind of keeping up with your friends. They're ways that people are going to assess who you are, and I think that's only going to increase, as technology becomes more and more relevant in everyday life.
I think we had another question back here. Oh, a few more.
I was wondering if I was wondering how.
Keep it a little close to your face, bro.
Like this?
Yes.
So I was wondering how would you feel about how we convey ourselves, our flow when we're pursuing our careers and advancing our education.
You get that, Brandon?
I'm sorry, what was the first part?
Conveying yourself.
Our composure and how we convey ourselves while pursuing our careers.
Presentation.
The question was on presentation and conveying yourself in terms of your career.
So, again, that's one of those things where presentation is important. It does matter. Here's the good news on presentation. Those standards seem to be becoming a little more lax. Just as a general matter, and and I'm not. I mean, we're old, but we're not that old, so I don't want to sound like back in my day, I went uphill both ways to school, so I don't want that to come across the wrong way, but it does matter to a degree of how you carry yourself, how you treat other individuals when you're in the workspace. So everything down to how you walk into, if you're talking about an interview, how you walk into an interview and your dress code for an interview does matter. It might not mean one thing about whether you're qualified or not, but every one of those things will be, I believe, evaluated by somebody who's in a position to give you an opportunity or not give you an opportunity. That being said, there's a balance. You should present yourself in a way that reflects who you are. I actually don't adhere in politics. They kind of always tell people you should dress conservatively, or you tell candidates, they told candidates you couldn't have a beard, you shouldn't have a beard if you run for office, or you should wear dark suits and these color ties. I don't really adhere to that. I think what people assess, in my opinion, is this person comfortable in their skin, and then is their presentation then a reflection of who they are. So if you're comfortable being presenting yourself in a more conservative way, then do it. If you're comfortable, you want to throw red laces on your shoes, do it. Whatever feels natural to you, you should do.
And I like your red laces, by the way.
How you doing, sir? Good afternoon. My name is Floyd. I had two questions for you. My first question is, if you could choose your degree, if you could change one, which one would have better furthered you for your career now? Like, cause me personally, I'm a finance and major in I'm a little nerd, my bad. I'm a finance major and I'm a minor in accounting. So I was wondering, I want to get into politics sooner or later, but further down, because my heart is in my city. I do want to fix it up. But do I have to have political science? That's like my main question. That's like my first question.
Go ahead.
You want the second one too?
Yeah, I'll take one.
Oh, the second one a little bit more raw.
Okay.
For a person that's as passionate as you say you follow Cory Booker because of what he believed in, how do you deal with other politicians that only in it for themselves, for their own people, and paying the people that put money in their pocket? How do you deal with them?
The first question, I'll go to the first question. You do not have to be a political science major, and I would absolutely keep on doing your majors. And I would, because one of the things that I was a liberal arts major, political science. But again, going back, I probably wish I would have spent a little more time in finance, economics, and business, because that's a big part of eventually what I went on to do, right? So as a political science major, I only had, and I took, when I was in high school, as I was saying, I was knucklehead. I was not really paying attention, and I only took 3 years of math in high school. My fourth year, I took what they call business accounting, which was basically for the people who weren't taking trigonometry or a college prep course. That didn't hold me back. I mean, it was a good course. I'm not saying anything about the course. I learned something in the course. But when I went, I gravitated. I knew I liked to write more, read more. So I was like, okay, I like the liberal arts area more than the math side. But looking back, I wish maybe if I could maybe had that minor in economics or that minor in finance, because a lot of what you deal with, you're dealing with, again, $750 million budget, right? I'm looking at budget documents all day. Now you have professional consultants who help you with that, right? People who have degrees that you're going to go on to get. But I think a little more background in that area would have been helpful for me long term. Secondly, I think the thing about politics and government is that people like to separate it, and what exists, because some of my friends they're not engaged, and they're like, I don't know how you deal with all those folks, and they're not about anything other than helping themselves, or and the reality is that's true. There are some people who are in it for reasons that I don't think are necessarily in the best interest of their communities. That's my opinion, right? But I don't think that separates politics from any other aspect of life. And I think what I would say more aspirationally, what we as a country have to start doing is stop with this idea that things that exist in politics don't exist in other sectors, right? You're going to find people in finance and accounting who, guess what, are just out for themselves, right? Or when people say, well, politics should be run more like a business. I'm like, well, which business? Halliburton? What are we talking about here? So that to me is what's most important is to know that I'm going to get this in government and politics. If you want to get involved, and you're going to run into people that you don't want to support or you think are in it for the wrong reasons, or or maybe out for
They're
themselves.
doing a
But
lot of malicious things.
yeah, like malicious. Yeah,
So you really don't have room for that. Like being a cop and being in politics, you don't have room for rotten tomatoes.
Yes.
Y'all have too much power over a lot of people's lives, so
You're-
gotta hold y'all at a higher standard.
You're right, and you should be. Like, when you're a public, I agree with you. The public official should be held to hopefully a standard that's even higher. The idea is to be that your leader and your official is trying to be, because you're entrusting that power. I guess what I would say is, don't let that discourage you. You know, don't let that discourage you, because it's easy. It can be easy to get discouraged, because the realest thing I can say to you is you're going to come across a lot of people, if you haven't already, that are not doing it for and necessarily the right reasons. And by the way, I don't say that to say like that's not a self-righteous thing. I'm not saying I get it perfect. I make mistakes every day, and I'm sure there's some people who don't think the things that I've done are necessarily in the community interest. I say that to mean that try not to separate politics and government from other spheres.
Yeah.
Just
The person with a job at the end of the day.
Right, 100%, and I think that's important to keep in mind. And then you'll get from your leaders, if we keep that in mind, then I think long term we'll get then leaders that we want and we deserve.
So I just want to thank Brendan for coming. He is a guy who has, like I said at the top, basically committed his professional life to our area, both in terms of electing great people into office and also serving our community and being passionate and a passionate advocate for our community. So I'm thrilled he could be here. I'm thrilled that we could listen and learn from his experience and wisdom. Also, in terms of the seminar, I just want to remind everyone that our next seminar will feature Shavar Jeffries, who will be a fantastic speaker as well. We've been doing this now for about, this is our second year, and really appreciate the turnout. We are going to start a new tradition, I understand, with today's session. I'm going to call Rose up, who is going to provide some
BC giveaways.
But thank you all for coming, and I'll see you guys soon, and I'm going to connect you over the road.
More of that round of applause. That BC Pride Spirit. So on behalf of the college, one, thank you for your time, because time is priceless. And I think we can all agree to that. The time that we share is so priceless. And your expertise, thank you for your knowledge. We thank you for your passion. And I think this is very good for our leadership series. And on behalf of the college, this is just a token to say thank you. Thank you guys so much for coming.